Okay, guys, so what we have here is another success story for you. And with all our success story videos, what we try and do is ask successful students to share their knowledge with you, so to help you on your IELTS journey. So we have a student who got a band 9 in speaking, so he obviously has some great advice about speaking, and he got very high scores overall. So Arnold is from Tanzania, and he's going to share his story with you. So let's start off, Arnold, just with a little bit of background information about you.
All right. My name is Arnold Kinabo. As Chris mentioned, I live in Tanzania, in the capital of Dar es Salaam. The reason I did the IELTS was because I wanted to study further, a master's, because I graduated some 2 years ago. And for almost all the applications, they require some kind of English language proficiency test. So I thought the IELTS was the one I'd stick to. So I found Chris's videos online as I was looking through for some kind of resource to guide me in my studies, and that's how I chanced upon his website, and I started speaking and communicating with him from there.
Can you share a little bit of information about your experience with the test? Like, how many times did you do it? What scores did you get? What did you think of the test overall?
Well, it was my first time to do it. I did it about a month ago, 16th of December. Yeah. What did I think of it? Okay. I got, like, as Chris mentioned, a 9 in speaking, a 7 in writing, an 8 in reading, and an 8.5 in listening. I was most worried about the listening because, well, so many things can affect your listening score, like equipment on the day, if you can hear everything clearly. But to my surprise, it went quite okay. So I'm thinking nerves has a lot to do with the preparations. Yeah.
You just mentioned nerves and stress and things like that. How did you cope with that? Because if you got 8.5 and a 9 and an 8 and a 7, obviously stress wasn't too much of an issue for you. So how did you? It comes up a lot. How did you deal with that?
Well, there were some days leading to the exams because I had like about 3 weeks to prepare, and I was working at the same time. I've been working for a period of about 2 years now. So you can't really like tell your employer to give you some time off to prepare for any tests as such. So I'd have to like use any spare time I got. And sometimes it was frustrating because you plan to cover a certain set of material for that day, and you wouldn't get the chance to do it, or yeah, you'd be so it was stressful, especially when you look to the net. You find everybody with their own specialist advice on how you should prepare for the IELTS. There's one source saying this, there's one page doing that. And then I would always have to look at the disclaimer at the bottom of the page or somewhere, and they'd say, we don't officially represent the IELTS in any way, or we're not officially part of them. And that was frustrating because it's like you're trying to find out if you're going about things the right way. So when I found someone who was a teacher of the IELTS and who knew exactly what the teachers were looking for, it was a big relief to me.
Absolutely. One of the things that I always say is just pick one source that you trust, and stick with that. It doesn't have to be me, it could be someone else. But the most important thing is not to look at 17 different websites all telling you how to write an introduction, for example. I mean, I always say that your writing is a reflection of your thinking, especially your writing. So if you are completely confused and you're thinking of 17 different ways to do something, how is that going to look on the paper? So that's great advice about just find one source and stick with it. So
Yeah.
let's start with speaking. Obviously you got about 9 in speaking. How did you go from someone who English wasn't your first language to getting a band 9. What was that journey? What did that look like?
Okay. Well, I've been speaking English for as long as I can remember, but public speaking hasn't always been one of my strong suits. So I really needed to know what exactly the teachers expected of me. Was it someone who could go on for hours speaking about random topics, or were they looking for key things? And when I chanced upon your videos and they told me that, for example, you're given a topic, you gave so many useful things concerning varying your language using synonyms, or the most important thing has to be that not everything you say needs to be truthful. They're not looking for a completely truthful story on whatever it is they give you. They just want to know how well you are at expressing yourself. So that was great advice, because on the day itself, I was given a piece to talk about a couple, a romantic couple, or a couple that really stood out for me. And it was hard to do because, well, that wouldn't really be one of the things I'd give a talk to. I'd be confident about giving a talk to anybody. But like when you think about it and you just think about, okay, what can I say in a way that can show that I'm able to express myself clearly? It helped a lot. Yeah, your advice helped.
It's not a truth test. It's not a lie detector test. What happens when I used to teach in Vietnam, some of the topics that come up were just totally alien to the students, because it wasn't because they were stupid, or because or they didn't have any experience. It was just very foreign to them, some of the topics. It was like, I remember one of the topics was like, describe an historical castle or something like that, and the Vietnamese student was like, how? I've never been to a Vietnamese castle or an historical castle. And I just said, well, make it up, just make it up. It's not a truth test. It's not a lie detector test. You can make, especially like part 3 or part 2, a really nice way to develop your answers is to use personal stories or tell some sort of a story or a narrative. And you can just make things up like that. I remember a few weeks ago, I was dealing with a student, and she was from Saudi Arabia, and we were talking about music. And she was like, to be honest, because of my religion, because of my culture, I don't play musical instruments. I know nothing about musical instruments. And I said, you can either just say that to the examiner and explain why, or just make it up. Like, I'd love to play the guitar because of this reason and this reason and this reason. And so if you had a student, you were talking to a student who was like at a band 7 level for speaking, and they wanted to move up to a band 8 or a band 9, what advice would you give them?
Well, the best advice I could give them is to practice speaking with people in the language itself. Like, especially on the test day or the days leading up to the test, it helps if you have someone to practice with. Like, I remember I had this friend who really helped me a lot. Like, after looking at the videos and after reading your advice on how to go about certain things, she lives far away. She's in Namibia, and she's also done the IELTS before. So she would be the teacher, I'd be the student. We'd go in as if just to simulate test conditions, and she would ask me what my name is. We would start the whole routine as formal as it was. I'd try not to laugh, and she'd ask me everything she thought would be asked in an IELTS test. And this went on for a period of about 3 weeks, every 1 or 2 nights, And it helps when you really practice, because then you become confident and you get used to things to say. Like, there's some phrases maybe that could just, stick to mind, which you'd be able to use on that day. I'm not saying you take a list of things to cram, but like the more you get used to saying things, the more confidently it flows out at you. So it'd help if you have
Absolutely.
some practice.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, because students ask things like, how do I improve my reading? How do I improve my listening? How do I improve my speaking? And it sounds really obvious, and students don't like this as an answer. But, if you want to improve your reading, read. If you want to improve your listening, listen. If you want to improve your speaking, speak. And students sometimes want some little trick or some little tip that is going to like allow them to speak fluently in English for 15 minutes. But really, for you to be able to speak for 15 minutes to at a band 9 level, that starts months, years before. Would you agree with that?
I do agree. I do agree, especially if you have some months to prepare. It would be really helpful. Because I say again, a lot of it has to do with confidence, I feel. Like, I remember the first time I practiced with my friend, I barely had anything to say, and this was something which I spoke every day, a language I spoke every day, but still, you start thinking about, okay, what can I say to impress the listener? But it's not usually about that. It's just about, I mean, there are some things which you say which you think are pretty average, but to the listener, they feel like, okay, fine, yeah, that's unique, or that sounds good. So let me keep listening to what he has to say. Let him keep going. And then you feel like, okay,
And
fine, I messed up. I have to scratch the whole thing and start over again, and that just messes up with you sometimes. But no, like you said, even native English speakers make mistakes here and there. So just pick yourself up and move on. Yeah.
days, these days there are so many ways that you can practice your speaking. I mean, you're only limited by your imagination, really. And go to Google and find there are millions of ways that you can go and practice your speaking. Go and find a partner in a Facebook group. Go to a forum and you could find a partner. Exchange language. Go to an IELTS school. Go to an English school. Go to Starbucks and speak to. I had a student and she was really struggling with her speaking, and she went and got a job in Starbucks because she knew that she was going to have to she was forced to speak English every single day. Should every student get a job in Starbucks? No, that would be silly. But just find a way, if you're struggling with your speaking, to speak English every day, because it is a skill and you will get better and better and better and grow in confidence. So what do you plan to do with your band 9 in the future now? What will you be able to do with it?
Well, apply to as many schools as possible for one, because that was my main aim for doing the IELTS. I want to pursue a master's, preferably someplace in the UK or Australia, any place that has what I want to study and that I get selected in. And I will help a friend or two with it because they also plan to study further. So everything that I learned in my journey on taking these IELTS, I will try and hope to pass on to them.
That's amazing. That's really, really nice of you to be able to help other people with it. So good luck in your future, and if you need anything, and apologies for the location and people walking behind me. Well,
Oh,
I'm in a hotel at the moment. I'm on holiday, but I wanted to speak to you because it's rare to meet someone who gets a band 9 in any of the skills, and it's really amazing. Advice that you've given. And to the people watching this, many people will be watching it and be like, he just told me to practice. He just told me to do that, or he just told me to do that. Why is he not giving us some tips and tricks and things like that? Are there any tips and tricks?
what I did was, as I was practicing the reading, after the reading test, I would say, okay, fine. What advice has Chris given me on this? Because I trusted your sources. Or what have I learned about myself? And I'd write it down somewhere like, okay, fine, for reading. You don't have to read every word. So I'd write it down somewhere in my notes. And for listening, if you get stuck somewhere or if you think that they've moved on ahead of you, don't dwell on what you've missed, because hey, you might even be able to remember it afterwards, or you might just make that lucky guess. So move on with them. Just keep on moving on with them. For writing, to be honest, this is how I found your videos, the 5-day challenge. Another friend of mine from Zimbabwe, she just sent me this link, and I looked at it, and at first I thought, 5 days, it's got to be some kind of a scam or something. But I looked at it and you had these really concrete tools, and how there was like a form of answering every question. Well, I started off with the most popular questions, those discussions, those discussion questions. Pick a side and discuss on it. So like I'd learn, okay, fine, this is how you start with in writing. You start with the intro, you start with the overall, you do the first paragraph, second paragraph, and the conclusion. Which, if you remember, I was a bit skeptical about just having two paragraphs on that. And I even had to go back and ask you, are you sure this is enough? And you were like, yes, it's not about writing a billion words on the paper. It's just about using what words you have to express the ideas that go on in your mind, that are running around in your mind. As for speaking, I already told you what I did, but like everything, reading, writing, listening, speaking, I would write it down on some notes somewhere. And every time before I take off a new practice test, I'd quickly refer to the notes. Okay, fine. This is reading. I'm not supposed to read every single word, and I'm not supposed to read out loud. Let me just peruse through the text so I know which kind of text is, which part of the text contains which answer. And then I get back to the questions, back and forth, back and forth. It helped me a lot, especially when you have your notes aside and pick out, like, you know what your weekend. In a few tests, you'll know, okay, fine. I'm not so good at reading quickly, or I'm not so good at writing properly, or I'm not so good at so it helps. It helps if you have some notes aside.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with everyone, and good luck in the future. And if you need any help, I don't think you will need any help with English, but if you need any help at all, let me know, and I'll help you out. And thank you very much for helping others. It's great advice that you've given. Thanks very much, Arnold.
I will need help, of course, because it's like a daily thing. It's like you constantly need to improve on what you have. But thanks again for giving me this opportunity. I only hope that what I had to say was of some benefit to the listeners, to your expected listeners, and to everybody else out
Absolutely.
there. Good luck.
No,
Good luck.
it's
And
it's great because so many students don't know who to trust, and there are many sources of information out there. So
many
when
sources.
there is a person who has been there, done it, then you know that information is golden for students. So thanks again. I better go before somebody comes into this room. I'm in a business center, a place in the hotel, so I better go before someone comes in and interrupts me. But thank you very much, Arnold. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for having me.
All right, bye bye.
Bye.
Oh, cancel.